On this episode of The State of Happiness, we have Wesley Van Eeden. He's an artist, an illustrator, and a muralist whose work you've seen all over the world. But more importantly, he is the creative artist behind the Leslie Inc. Happiness Decks app Career Edition. Find out the story of making the beautiful art on this app, his creative process, what he hopes for you to get from the Happiness Decks app illustrations, and more. Stay tuned. Welcome to The State of Happiness. I'm your host, Leslie Juvin-Acker, Chief Happiness Officer at Leslie Inc., where we provide solutions for finding happiness for stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed senior-level managers, executives, and entrepreneurs. The State of Happiness podcast offers you conversation, inspiration, and ideas for helping you increase your happiness in the areas of your personal relationships, your career, your abundance, and your emotional well-being. So come along with us on this episode, and we'll help you get the tools, resources, and inspiration you need to help you find your own state of happiness. It's 2:00 in the morning. You can't sleep. Your mind is racing, thinking about work, your career, and your future. How can I get a raise? Why is my boss being so difficult? What am I doing wrong? What's keeping you up at night? If you had the answers to these questions, what choices would you make? Thanks to Leslie Inc.'s Happiness Decks app, Career Edition, you can have the answers to these questions. In less than 60 seconds, you can gain essential perspective and insight to the questions that are keeping you up at night. Download it today. Leslie Inc.'s Happiness Decks app, available in the Apple Store and Google Play Store. Get the answers you need and feel good about tomorrow. Get exclusive news and invitations today at leslieinc.org/app. Get the answers you need with the Happiness Decks app by Leslie Inc. Hey Wesley, thank you so much for joining us on the State of Happiness podcast today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
So let's get into it. I want to talk about how we met and what was our initial meeting and the circumstances around it, which then sparked this creative process that we got to share together. Why don't you go into it?
Well, I live in South Africa, and I'm a little bit isolated from different industries, specifically the clothing industry, which is something that I've always been interested in. And I've worked with it, with the industry for a little bit in the past. And I set up a profile on Malachi, which is an industry website for people who work for the clothing industry or who want to get hired. And from what I remember, I think Leslie is working for Malachi, the website, and she actually reached out to me because I was interested in perhaps moving to California. And the initial Skype interview that we had, it was really cool because it almost became a very motivating discussion between myself and Leslie, because I talked a little bit about my aspirations, and she really gave me some fresh perspectives in my career, and really made me feel motivated about continuing this path that I've chosen. And then we started doing some work together, specifically on this project, the app, the Happiness Decks app.
Right. You know what was so cool is that with Malachi.com being kind of like this universe that Chad Mihalich created, he just pulls everybody together from all over the world over there at Malachi.com. It's also a job board. It's a networking community that he's created. And I was contributing articles every week for them and helping to coach and give free career advice during the Agenda trade show. And I like to joke and say that we are all living in Chad's world. And he just brings us all together. And what's great about the platform at Malachi.com was that, we were on completely different sides of the planet. And I remember seeing your art and just being so touched by it. I thought it was just so simple and beautiful and impactful. And you do so many beautiful murals. And it just really spoke to me creatively and visually that I just knew we had to talk. And ever since our conversation, you've actually accomplished a lot of things. Why don't you tell us what you've been up to since that conversation?
Well, I just also just wanted to reiterate what I had said was actually when you reached out to me and we started discussing things. In fact, I think it was with you and Frank, your husband, and it was like I said, I do live in kind of a isolated place where not there is creativity and interesting things happening, but I guess not from an international or global scale, with like the major kind of clothing companies and industries and things like that. And you really, the perspectives that you gave me really really helped me stay motivated. I think. Yeah, it was quite surprising because it was initially just an interview, and then you were like, you gave some really interesting words of wisdom that made me think about my work in a different way. Because when you're in an environment and people don't really value your work as much, and then someone like you started talking about my work and how important it is and how it can make a difference in communities and things like that, it really stirred my soul in many ways. So I appreciate that. So in fact, I actually was going to do a post at some stage.
Oh, thank you.
I was actually going to do a post at some stage and just give props to you to say, as someone who's actually coached me in some way with the work that I do, to say thanks so much. Because from the last time we discussed, talking in that meeting, I think it was about 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Yeah, I've managed to do quite a few creative projects and international projects. So I do a lot of illustration stuff for big ad agencies and some smaller companies as well, and obviously murals. And I've had the opportunity to go to New Zealand last year to do a big mural project for quite a big agency there. And recently I've just also done another international mural in Virginia, which has been life-changing for me. So yeah, I mean, it's some of the other creative projects have been really interesting, and it's been an exciting time.
That is so awesome because not only have you traveled internationally and had these amazing murals and pieces of art shared all over the world, but you also had a baby.
Yes, yes. Since we last chatted, so we now have I have a 6-year-old Cade and now a 2-month-old, which is Timothy, which we are super stoked about.
I think that's exciting because I remember in our conversation, I also said, "Oh, I see another child for you coming." And you were like, "Oh, really?" Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally did not remember that.
I remember that very much. And then I didn't even know that you were pregnant, you and your wife. And then all of a sudden you're like, "We have a new baby." And I'm like, "Oh my God."
Well, that's amazing. Well, I hope you sense no more.
I think you're okay. You're safe. So let's talk about you as this amazing artist, internationally known. Um, let's talk about your creative process. I'm going to ask you, how do you feel when you create, and what emotions are typically involved throughout your creative process?
Well, a lot of people ask me about the work that I do and why I do it. And I often say the difference between a creative and a person that doesn't do creative work. I think that all humans are creative, no doubt. But I think the difference between someone like me or someone who has the urge to step out from their comfort zone or traditional roles in industry or whatever is that they have this deep desire. There's something inside of them that they can feel is kind of egging them on. And that's kind of like my creative process that I have this need inside of me that if I don't do this, I don't feel completely happy within my life. I actually feel a bit, I wouldn't say depressed, but I would feel, um, just feel like I'm not fulfilling the role that I think that I've been given on this planet. So the creative process on how I work, especially if I'm doing well, it actually works both in the commercial context or in a fine art or personal project that I do. I normally read a lot about the topic and do a lot of sketching, and I often do a lot of mind mapping where I try and think of various topics that fit or revolve around the problem that I'm trying to solve, and then I try and just see if there's anything between those topics that or themes that actually have like a common denominator or make an interesting composition in terms of an idea or in a visual. And when I create my work, yeah, I certainly get into what they kind of call like a zone of some sort. Especially when I'm painting a mural or that, or illustrating on the computer, I don't like being disturbed because I kind of go into kind of like a different kind of time where time doesn't really exist in many ways, where I'm able to work through like a flow state where I'm working through something and it's almost you're meditating over what you're working on. And I definitely feel while I'm working through that, no problems exist besides the kind of project that I'm working on, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. That actually sounds like self hypnosis, that you go into a hypnotic state and you become so focused because hypnotic states are nothing but heightened states of awareness. And you just go into that quote zone, like athletes talk about, or artists, for example, and you're just in it to win it. How do you know? This is my question for you. How do you know when you're on the right track, when you're on the right track creatively? How do you know when you're on the right track creatively, and how do you know when you're on the wrong track creatively?
That is a very tricky question, but and I think everyone's answer is going to be different. But for me, I think there's many things that I've done in the past where I've like different kinds of creative things that I've done, whether it's been music or skateboarding or cooking or and obviously now art. Like those previous things are all things that I've done in the past, and although I've been pretty good at them, all of them have been like quite a challenge. But with creativity, with drawing and illustration, design work, and murals, it's always seemed like it's always a challenge, but it's a different kind of challenge. It's almost like going down a river as opposed to going up a river where I seem to be in some kind of a stream where things are kind of coming together. I feel like when I'm on the right track, when I do work and people respond to it in some way, and I'm not talking about putting something on Instagram or social media, but more of producing a work and then someone comes to me and says, "Hey, we'd like to commission you that looks similar to what I've created on a personal capacity." So I think there's two things. One, feeling like I'm going with the stream and things are just seem to be falling into place, even though I am working hard, but not so hard that it's a struggle. And also in terms of how the community and people around me are responding to that work. And I think if you can, and doesn't work for all people, but I think if you feel like your work is resonating with other people and it's also resonating with yourself in however way, then I think that's a good sign that you may be on the right track.
That sounds really good. And you know what's really cool is that because you create art that can be distributed, right? Like you helped us come up with the illustrations for the Happiness Decks app, but you do things like posters and you do things like clothes, and you don't even realize that there are people around the world who are carrying or experiencing a piece of you and your heart and your soul. And that's an amazing, powerful thing. I mean, even for us here at our house, we have your art hanging in our hallway and in my son's room. And it's very rare that we don't think of you and think fondly of you. And it's such a great way to build this kind of psychic community of supporters in a way.
I actually get goosebumps when I hear you talk about that, because it's a lot of what I do, and the reason why I do my work is I've actually come from a place of struggle and depression and finding my path and what I want to do, and I've always wanted to do work that I hope that lifts people up or lifts communities up, or it almost, the work that I do almost acts as a metaphor for like positive positive thoughts and lifting other people up or inspiring other people. So I'm really glad to hear that, because it's been a long road, and I do this work for me to make me feel better, but it's really an added bonus when I know that people like you or other people who support me and get the work. It's a really good feeling to know that it's resonating with other people as well.
Oh, absolutely. And even now, I don't know, have you ever done app illustrations or tarot card or affirmation deck kind of work before? Is this your first time with me?
Not specifically. I
Your
have
first
done
time with me?
with you for sure. I have done some emoticon stuff for another brand, but this app was definitely a different kind of project. It was definitely very challenging, and it really stretched me. But I enjoyed it so much. It was really a super experience.
What was so great was that the process of creating the art on my side with you was really intuitive, and you I gave you a lot of free reign, but there was a moment where you said, I appreciate it, but you got to give me some limits. And I think creatively, sometimes limits or challenges kind of get you to think in a different way. Can you explain how that worked for you during that process, creating the app illustrations?
Yeah, I think just working through this exciting app that you've created and I've collaborated with you was to take some of each card and interpreting it, so that when someone looks at it, they can because art is obviously interpretive and people can look at it in their own way, and I think to do it to illustrate it, to illustrate each card in such a way that when someone looks at it, it's not going to be cliched in terms of a specific perspective, but when they look at it, they can get their own they can get their own interpretation of what each card is saying. And I think having the limitation of where the creative limitation of where I can go with the concept of each card is a challenge, and but it's a good challenge because it creates the room. Sometimes restrictions create more room for growth for an idea, so that specifically someone can look at it in their own way and be excited about what they're reading and what they're getting out of it, as it, as opposed to it being a prescribed specific thing, which I think is super important for what you're doing with the happiness decks, where people are trying to discover their own path. So the illustrations are, I think, very metaphorical, where people can look at it and, yeah, just interpret it in their own way. And it's just like a song can be interpreted in many ways. I'm hoping that these illustrations are going to do the same thing.
Absolutely. I think you just sold the whole app right there because that was so beautifully said. What's even greater is that the art itself. Let's talk about some of the features about the art that make it special as opposed to different types of oracle or affirmation deck illustrations out there. One thing I want to talk about is that you and I both wanted to create a multicultural, multiracial deck, even though the people in the deck are these abstract cartoons. We made sure together that every race on the planet was equally represented. That was so important for me because I am a multiracial, multi-ethnic person. I'm European, but I'm Asian and I'm American. And I would go into a metaphysical bookstore or I would go buy an affirmation deck, and all the illustrations on the decks would be 99% of the time white people. And I didn't see myself in those white people. I felt like, okay, that's great, but not all angels are white and not all spirit guides and goddesses and gods are white. And I felt like we, Hispanics and blacks and Native American and, us mixed race people, we're not really represented in the spiritual community, the metaphysical community. And I felt like that was a major component. And you being in South Africa, there's a lot of racial relations that has been going on there for a long time. How would you say this aspect of creating art that is multiracial, multi-ethnic, how does that impact with you and where you are in South Africa?
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially with the designs and illustrations that I've worked with you on this app. I've been very conscious from a young age about certain race issues and things like that that the country had been working through. And obviously, there's always racial tensions in every country in some way or in some respect. And the work that I do specifically is about bridging the divide between different races and not necessarily seeing people's, the graphics that I do are very abstracted representations of different people and different races. And that's actually exactly what I'm trying to do with the work, where it's not necessarily specific. When someone looks, in fact, someone looked at one of the murals that I did, and they were like, "Why are there four males in the mural?" And I was like, "Well, one is actually a girl." But just because of the way it's been designed, people could interpret it in a way where someone could look at it and it's not necessarily always gender specific. So that's very much about my work, where people can look at it, and whatever background that you're coming from, I'm hoping that people can interpret it in their own way and resonate within their culture. Specifically because where I come from, we've got 13 official languages in our country. There's so many. I guess I'd compare it very similar to New York in a way, where there's so many different cultures in New York. It's probably not as diverse as that, but there are so many different African cultures, in South Africa, which is a huge inspiration in my work in terms of creating work that is sensitive and thinking about different culture in the work that I do, so that it isn't just one dimensional.
You know, what's interesting is that your work isn't overtly political. It doesn't try to make any statements, but it does just because it reflects a world that is ideal and is different. And sometimes people, as you say, see the world in a different way. And because they see somebody else's world, they might see that as a political statement or even a threat. But when I look at your work, and what inspired me was that you were not so white-centric, but you were looking at the world from many lenses and from a multicultural perspective, which I felt lent so beautifully to the career edition of the Happiness Exab. And I'm so excited that we could communicate that. And what's also great about the art is that, like you said, it's abstract, but it's also metaphorical. And it goes into that interpretation and the imagination of the human consciousness, of the human imagination. And from there, like you said, people can really get a fresh perspective on their life. And who knows, if they look at your image or if they see the words underneath it, they could go in a very different direction than if they hadn't been inspired at all.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of my work is about exploring imagination and exploring the idea of the abstract. It's like, that's why I found this project really exciting, because creating metaphors in an illustration, and especially this project, I compare it almost similar to how someone as a designer would create a logo. I find like creating logos to be actually the hardest thing to create. Besides painting large-scale murals, I think a logo is actually one of the hardest things you could design, as well as creating metaphors, because a lot of logos could be metaphorical when you're designing something for a brand, purely because you're trying to convey an idea that represents a certain thing, but you also do not want to be so specific so that people's imagination could, when you look at the work, your imagination, opens up your thoughts and your processing in your brain, because imagination for me it's like the key. It's one of the first steps in terms of finding your path, because if you don't have imagination, if you're not imagining or thinking where you want to go, or where you want to be in your life in terms of your career or your aspirations, then how else are you going to achieve the things that you want to do? I always believe like writing down goals or writing down what you'd like to achieve, and I feel that that's a form of imagination. You're imagining what you would like to happen, and when you start thinking about that, your brain actually starts processing that. And then I feel like with those positive thinking, your actions then start replicating that. If you're taking that seriously, if you're imagining about it and dreaming big. I know those are all cheesy things, but I think that's why I hope that these graphics will help, because I think metaphors are like a form of imagination.
That is so interesting that you say that, because I believe imagination is everything. Because if you imagine something enough, it becomes real. Whether it's a psychotic thought or if it's a happy fantasy, your body doesn't know the difference between real and not real. And let me give you two examples of that. When I was a little girl, I was about 4 or 5 years old. My first cognitive thought that I can ever remember, where I'm talking to myself, was, you better use your imagination, because you're not going to be able to get anywhere. Like, you have to, and it was really specifically, if you're going to have any fun here, you're going to have to use your imagination. And that was really the thought that I had. And I had always believed that to be true. The second thing is that sometimes we get so stressed out. And even for me, pushing this app out, all of the projects that I have going on my side. And what do we do with our imagination? We think of the worst case scenario. And when we think of that worst case scenario, our body doesn't know the difference. It just sees the image and it starts to react hormonally, emotionally. And I remember being so stressed out. I was so stressed. I needed to go get massages. It was so bad. And I asked right before I went to sleep, God, show me what you want me to know about abundance and success. And so I went to sleep and I had a dream. But at the end of that dream, I woke up and I heard a voice say in the dream, what you see in your mind is not real and it's not true. And a lot of the times we don't realize that we're literally making things up. Like, this person doesn't love me, so we're going to act like they don't love us. Or I'm going to run out of money. So we start stressing like the sky is falling and we have no money, and we start behaving reactively. And in that moment, when I woke up from that dream, I realized most of the things that I think are not real and they're not true. And if you decide that something is real and true, your subconscious mind, your emotions, your body will start acting on it as if it was. So like you said, your imagination, starting the goal, writing that goal down and saying, hey, I want to achieve this, and this is real to me, and it's true to me. Your subconscious mind will do it because you believe it. But if you look at this and go, this could never happen for me, that's not possible, your subconscious mind says, you're right. It's like, who was it that said that? I don't know if it was Ford, but there was a famous person who said, whether you believe it, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And it all starts within your imagination.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. That's that, and as I mean, I'm not like a super multi-millionaire. Money isn't for me a thing to say, well, that's what makes me successful. But I can definitely vouch for that kind of thinking, especially from where I've come from with limited resources and lots of constraints. And if I didn't think in that same frame of mind, I wouldn't have been able to achieve the things and the opportunities that I've had. So I definitely think agree with you that on those points. I think you're absolutely right. I think it's so important to, the other thing is to also make sure that when you have those goals and those thinking, to just slowly put it into action, and not see whatever goal, whatever thing that someone wants to achieve, just take small chunks at it, at a small, at a small time, or at a small piece at a time. When you're trying to achieve something that you want to do, and I think for me the trick is just to find that thing that really makes you passionate to do that thing, where no matter what, you really want to get up and do that thing. And it could be anything, it's just a matter of finding that specific little thing that you want to do and just slowly work at it. And for me, I was explaining it to a student that I was chatting to a while ago. It's like a wave where you're paddling out, and you first got to get fit enough to get out to that wave, and it really sucks because it's not much fun, and you haven't actually enjoyed the fruits of that wave. I know it might sound a bit cheesy, but when you're on that wave, and it's going to be tough at times, but if you're passionate about it, it can work out, And sometimes that wave can take you to different places, but yeah, for me, it's also there's a saying. Focus on the journey and not the destination, and that is something that I live through as well, because sometimes your journey takes you into a different destination, and that's that's the exciting thing about life, because we don't know where we're going to go in terms of every direction that we're going to go, and that's the exciting thing as well, you know.
Absolutely. And actually, I feel like we're in a psychic wavelength because I was literally about to say, even if you have these goals, don't get so attached to them because there might be a better goal out there. You're like, oh, maybe I'd like to have $100,000 a year, but what if the universe gives you $1 million a year? Are you gonna spit on that? No. So it's really about just disattaching that. This is a nice ideal for me to have. Being somebody who can manage a great amount of money, or somebody who could manage a great amount of responsibility, or someone who can channel a great amount of creativity. It's not really about the outcome or even the goal. It's about the process and the ideals that you have that maintain them, such as love and joy, patience, appreciation, gratitude. So those are the things to strive for, rather than saying, oh, if I don't have $1 million by the end of next year, then I'm a worthless person and I'll never make it. Because the Happiness Dex app specifically is about just inspiring your creativity and keeping you in the game and keeping you passionate and making you look at your life in a different way, rather than being so self-judgmental and critical, and down on yourself. So my question to you, Wes, is knowing what you know about Leslie Inc. and what I've been doing, and you having personally experienced, some coaching and inspiration from me. How do you think this app will help people?
I really think the app is going to help people get a fresh perspective. It's something that is contemporary, like you said. I don't think there's anything quite like this on the market that is so. I mean, we've really spent a long time researching and developing the graphics, and obviously you working with the content. I think, the app is going to really just help them to, when they're looking through it or working through it, get a fresh perspective. I'm hoping that the metaphors are going to speak power into their lives, where they're going to be able to interpret it in their own way and help activate things in their mind, that maybe someone else or may not be able to have done if they were going and speaking to someone. I really think that the metaphors and the cards are really going to speak to them in such a way that only an individual is going to be able to relate to. Specifically, when each person looks at it, it's going to be different from another person.
That's so true. It's like getting your own individual coaching session, but through your own imagination, because you're going to take the illustrations and the affirmations in a completely different way, and from your unique viewpoint and perspective of life, you're going to make it special and put a special mark on your own life and your own decisions.
Yeah, and I just think that also, I believe that also through the path that I've traveled, finding happiness in the work that I do and able to make a successful living and being a creative illustrator and muralist and graphic designer, I do feel like there is some kind of transcending some of that history into the work as well. I'm hoping that there is a sense of authenticity with the work that will resonate with people when they're looking for something within the cards.
Right. It's interesting because it's like by looking at the cards, it's like somebody will be able to find an inspiring part of themselves, because if anything, we see life as we see ourselves. So if you can see things from a fresh perspective, it's like seeing yourself from a fresh perspective. And being someone who can see your art and see somebody who understands what they've been through and what they are going through if they're using the app actively. is that they're like, wow, this app was created by people who understand me and who've been through what I'm going through now, and have made it out through the other side. So tell us what you're doing now, and if somebody wants to work with you or get in contact with you to tell you about, how the app illustrations have touched them, how can people reach you, Wes?
Well, currently I'm working on a few secret projects that I can't share, but they are exciting. But one project I can share is I recently did some poster design work for a big music festival, one of the longest music festivals run in South Africa. And that's happening in August. And they've also asked me to work on a mural at the festival. So I'm looking forward to that. So that will be in August. I've also just come back from Virginia. I'm doing a mural there, and there will be a video released soon showing the process of that. But yeah, if anyone wants to get in touch, or I love getting emails, and I love trying to help people or give people inspiration or perspective on things. They can check out my website or send me a mail. My website is www.resoborg, that's resoborg.com, and my email is the same, wesley@resoborg.com.
All right, that's awesome. And you can find you on Instagram too with the same title, right? Alrighty, great. Wesley, thank you so much for joining us today. I have to say it's an honor and a privilege to be able to share your art with thousands, if not millions of people. And thank you for being a part of this journey with us. I look forward to future opportunities. And also, if you're listening, reach out to Wes. He is such a kind and loving heart and a wonderful inspiration to our global community, brothers and sisters in the Happy Camper community. Don't be afraid to reach out. And if you are looking for an artist, a creative graphic designer, someone to bring your creative vision into the world, reach out to him as well. He's open for commissions. And if you have some feedback on the art illustrations, let us know. And you can reach out to us at Happiness Decks on Instagram, and you can write us to at happyapps@leslieinc.org. All right, thank you so much, Wesley.
Thanks, Leslie, for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been super rad talking, and I wish everyone the best. And yeah, thanks so much. It's been super cool.
Thank you.
Looking for a speaker for your next company event? Leslie Juvin-Acker is San Diego's expert in emotional intelligence. Captivating audiences with her insightful, motivational stories, Leslie draws on her 10-plus years of experience in career life coaching to provide poignant, inspirational advice for all. Highly regarded as an expert in the field of leadership development, Leslie is your spark for a positive company culture. Have Leslie inspire your team. Contact me, Anna Gomez, at 347-748-0513 to book Leslie today. Have Leslie speak at your next company event. 347-748-0513.
A many thanks to you, Happy Campers, for joining us today on this episode of The State of Happiness. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can join me at Twitter at Leslie Juvin, as well as follow at Leslie Inc. on Instagram, and talk with us at Facebook at Official Leslie Inc. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to leave us a rating and subscribe and share with a friend. As always, thanks for joining us, and remember, a smile goes a long way.